Hi everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Pageant Network. My name is Maya Santana Pilar and I am your host for today's topic. And we're going to be talking about, this is coming from my own experience and from my team as well at Miss Canada Globe Productions, which is racism and discrimination and stereotypes. So how can we break the stereotypes as Canadians? So I would like to talk to you about first my own experience. Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about my own experience about racism and discrimination in pageantry. First, from a title holder's point of view. And as you've seen on the actual video, I've shown you pictures during my pageant years. And I've experienced first racism because of the fact that I am not Caucasian and I'm half Filipina and half Italian. So with my race itself, it became an issue because when I do appearances, a lot of people were like, oh, you're Miss Canada Globe or you're Miss Toronto Tourism, really? And then they would look at you and they would think it's like, oh, I was thinking more of like a blonde girl, blue-eyed, or I was thinking more of like a Caucasian girl, a white girl. So I was like, what can I say through that, But sometimes people really tend to forget that we are in a multicultural country. But again, there's a saying that when people throw you stones, you throw them bread. So you give love to ignorance, right? So I would say that, we are in a very multicultural country, and that it's not only Caucasians who are actually Canadians. And with that saying, whenever I do speeches and during appearances, I would talk about my race, and that how everybody in Canada belong to a one big melting pot. So that is the experience of racism through that into a title holder's point of view. Now, stereotypes and discrimination. And if you've seen the pictures when I was a title holder, I wasn't your typical beauty queen figure. I was never a size 0 to begin with, nor a size 2. So I'm the type of person that has a body type that would be more in the range of size 6. And to that itself, they were like, oh, you're big, size 6 to size 10. You're big to be a Miss Canada Globe, or you're big to become a pageant queen. What did you do? Into a point where I was very insecure about myself and how I look, because there are days that like I fit in the mold, but there are days that I don't fit in the mold. And through past directors as well, where there always an issue about my weight. I remember where I was brought in a gym because I was ready to compete in the national event, and therefore I had a personal trainer and was giving me diets and workout regimens that I need to follow, strict regimens, to a point where at that time when I was a title holder, I was housed, so we had an official residence. And I remember when my mom and my sisters would bring me food at the place where I was staying, and my director would have been so upset because she was telling me, you know, Filipino food is so fattening. You should stay away from rice. You should stay away from fried foods. You should stay away from pork because a lot of Filipino dishes are made with pork. And then on top of that, when my nonna would bring me lasagna or spaghetti or pasta, even pizza, which I love, and also like breads like focaccia and everything like that, my director was so against it. And she would basically go to the fridge and throw the food that my family has brought to me. So that was the intense part of trying to fit in. So I'd be living on days where I would be eating protein bars, which I really hate. And the taste of it just really, I couldn't stomach it. I hated the fact that I had to eat protein bars or a can of tuna, just like snacking it, and then you eat it with like romaine lettuce and green peppers with no salad dressing, nothing like that. So it was a complete straight and strict diet that I had to do because I have to fulfill that role of being a title holder. It was very sad, especially when I had to compete internationally. I had to work out at least twice a day, one in the morning and then at night. So but that is understandable because at that time pageantry was very focused on the person, on the facial and the physical aspect of a title holder, than being intelligent and talking about your advocacy and question and answer is more on the secondary part. So it's so sad that actually happened in the pageant industry, but it is a reality that we had to face that during my year and people in my batch. So another thing that we had to another discriminatory thing that I had to deal with was because of the fact that I wasn't tall enough. I was 5'7", so it was like they were expecting someone tall, someone who has a model-esque figure. So the tall itself and to be skinny was the major thing that's based on what pageant queens were. So that's another stereotype that ever happened, and that's the reason why people would never accept pageants, because of the fact that what they have seen in the past. You know, the dolled up, always have to be perfect, always have to be in a good posture, good behavior, always dolled up in a way that you always have to have makeup, even when you're doing a walkathon and you're doing a stair climb challenge. You always be up to a par on your appearance, which means proper hair, makeup, and I completely agree with that, because of the fact that when you're a public figure, then you have to be presentable at all times. But at the same time, we are bringing an image of being perfect when people are never perfect. we have come through an age where, you know, people get sick to be perfect, you know, and that was my advocacy because of the fact that I experienced eating disorders, and to be able to fit in to what they call typical pageant queen. So during my reign, I would be talking about that constantly because people even always tell me whenever they see me, whenever I'm doing appearances, there would be great days where I fit to the mold of being a pageant queen, and then there would be days where they would be like, oh my god, you're so fat, like, how did you win the pageant? And even my directors would be like measuring my arm, and they would always play with the under of my arm and say, oh, that's very jiggly. I guess you've eaten a lot of rice, or you've eaten a lot of fried pork. You know, another discriminatory statements that were being said to me. They even measure the chin. If I have a double chin, then like things would come up, and to a point where in the old pageant days, I still remember, like, because you have to live with a place that the director is providing you, and I even live with a director, for crying out loud. And I remember I was rationed with the food that I have to eat, but the food that they provide to begin with was very unhealthy, because I remember you were given craft dinners most of the time with hot dogs or wieners. So that's gonna be your food when you're basically at home and doing nothing. And if you're basically doing appearances, and I remember there was one event where there was the rat race by United Way, and they were serving Chinese food, you know, for all the participants. And I was looking at like, oh, you know, the spring rolls look so good. And the look that the director gave me was like, don't even dare. And a lot of people were like looking at me like, oh my God, I could see hunger in your eyes, you know, and to a point where you divulge at the end, and then you get yourself sick, and then you feel so guilty of what you basically put in your mouth that you have to feel like you have to throw up everything that you eat, and that's really sad. So again, that was the olden days where we had to live in that stereotypical pageant queen, what is expected for a title holder. So that's my experience when it comes to discrimination and stereotypes and racism. So again, nowadays that we are in a modern era, and when I took over the pageant, things were changed. So now I would talk to you about my experience in pageantry from a director's point of view, and also my MCGP team. But I would talk to you about first myself as a director. And now, as a director of a pageant in Canada, it's so sad to say, there is racism, especially because of the fact that people, contestants and their families, especially Caucasians, I'm not saying all, but mostly from towns and cities that the girl is coming from that don't have enough or don't have a lot of multiculturalism. So some parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, some parts of Manitoba, some parts of Newfoundland as well. I've encountered racism into a point where they were saying that, I didn't expect that a non-Caucasian would actually be the director of Miss Canada Globe. So I've experienced that personally. A lot of people were like saying that, how could it be that a lot of the Filipinos are actually working for this pageant? And I'm sure they're all blood related. And in the Filipino culture, yes, we have, and I have a lot of Filipino staff that are working for Miss Canada Globe Productions. And because they're older than me, I call them tita out of respect. But people would say, is that your aunt? Or are you related to one another? Because you call her auntie or tita. But the people need to know that out of respect, and this also comes a lot in Asian culture, also in East Indian culture. So when you have an older female that is working for you or you're friends with, you call them tita out of respect. So an auntie, but they're not blood related. Out of respect, you call them tita. So I don't only call my blood related aunts auntie, but I call also older Filipino women titas, because that's the way to respect older Filipino women. And they like that. They like to be respected. They like to be acknowledged that, they are a mother figure. And I remember a lot of the moms would always question that and say, so is this a family-run business? Because you're all Filipinos, even though we have a lot of Caucasians as well, and African Canadians who are working for the pageant. But because I am a Filipina Canadian, Italian Filipina Canadian, I was always discriminated because of the fact that I'm not Caucasian. And therefore, and this is truth, I have to work 10 times more in order to prove to all people, especially to the Caucasians, that I am worthy of being a Canadian pageant director because of the color of my skin and because of my ethnicity. So it's really sad that I have to say that, but it is still going on, even to the way how our staff, our non-Caucasian staffs are treated by the moms and also some girls in the pageantry. It's really sad. And you were thinking that adults should actually be setting an example for their daughters, but they're actually the one teaching the bad example to them. So a perfect example would be like, because it's run by Filipinos, so the winner would be either Filipinos or Asian. And just to let you know, the winners of Miss Canada Globe, I am the only Filipino Canadian that carried the title of Miss Canada Globe. And the rest of the others for the Miss Canada Globe category were all multiracial. Same thing with Miss Teen Canada Globe. I believe we had about 3 teens that are Filipino descent. And then we have Indian, we have Caucasian, we have African Canadian. Same thing with Miss Canada Petite. So that stigmatism that people have made against our non-Caucasian staff was really bad. And I could tell you, even my staff experienced abuse and harassment from mothers and girls. Number one example was Julie Tequila, or Julie Pulmones, is our delegate management officer. So Julie's position is to be a disciplinarian during the pageant week, where she would make sure that the girls behave and that they don't escape from the hotel to meet up with different people, because we are responsible for our contestants when they are in our premises, and especially teens. So there was a point where one girl, and she was from Saskatchewan, and she was saying and complaining to her mom, but this girl had a lot of attitude from day one anyways. And she always wanted to have things go on her way. So, and Julie, being a mother figure of the pageant, she was saying to her mom that I don't feel comfortable rooming with a non-Caucasian girl. So she was actually roomed with one African Canadian, one Asian Canadian, and then because there's one miss, one petite, and then two teens, and then the fellow teen was actually First Nations. And she was making a fuss about it, and she was talking to her mom and like, I don't feel comfortable rooming with those people. They might steal money from me or steal clothes from me. That was the racism and the statement that this girl was giving. So the mother was so upset and was telling Julie, listen, you have to listen to me, you chink. She used the word chink because obviously Julie is Filipino Canadian, but remember, she's also mixed with European descent and Chinese descent. So she had chinky eyes, yes, because most of the Asians have that almond-shaped eyes. Even I have almond-shaped eyes. So, and she said, I am a farmer's daughter, and I always get what I want. So you need to listen to me and you need to follow what I say. So the next day, when we were out for lunch with all the girls, obviously I will not let that go. I love my staff and the people that are working with me. And if they've ever experienced abuse, harassment, and just not being treated properly by some parents or girls, I will stand up for them, because that's the proper thing to do. And so I've addressed the situation to all the girls, and I said to them that we will not tolerate any discrimination or racism comments with what people are saying, because to us, we are all a family and we're Canadians. We're supposed to be accepting of one another regardless of what our race is, our background is, our ethnicity, our religion background. That's what makes us Canadians be Canadians. So after that, then the mother was avoiding me, was avoiding some of the staff. And then when her daughter did not win, she was making a fuss about it. And then I said, well, it's the reason why your daughter did not make it is because of her attitude. And at MCGP, we have a conduct mark that is given by the head chaperone, which is the delegate management officer, Julie, and other people who are dealing with the girls. So that being said, that's the reason why her daughter did not make the semis. Okay, so another experience that my staff dealt with was when we are in the Korean barbecue restaurant, and another girl from Saskatchewan said, my dad told me that when I'm in Toronto, I should not be eating any meat from any Oriental restaurant because they're serving dogs and cats. And I'm like, unbelievable. Like, I can't believe that all this stereotypical statements and racial comments I'm hearing, especially when an older adult would say that to her daughter, to his daughter, you know? And I said to the girl, well, first and foremost, we are in Toronto and we are in Canada, and there's animal rights, and there's only a certain amount and a type of meat that is allowed to be served in restaurants, especially in Toronto, and that's pork, beef, lamb, chicken, turkey, and that's it, and goat. Okay, and then there's wild meat, but wild meat was never actually served in restaurants, major restaurants in Canada or in Toronto. You have to actually buy from a wild meat store or hunt. You need to hunt, and then like to get moose meat or deer meat, you have to hunt for that, or bear meat, but not dogs and cats or rats. I remember one girl was saying that too. So right there, we had to break the stereotype and explain to her. But even then, she still didn't touch meat. So for us in the pageant, as an organizer, we would always tell the judges that we want a girl who is very open-minded and is willing to open her palette, open her environment, especially when she has to compete internationally. Because such like in Europe, in Southern Europe, most of the meats are lamb, goat, and that's what they eat. So, and then there's even in the Middle East where they serve horse meat, camel meat. So as a Canadian representative, we're known to be hospitable, and we're known to be nice people, and that we are willing to experience different things. So with that itself, we have to educate our girls and make sure that they are aware that when you are a Canadian title holder, you have to be for everybody. Okay? Another experience that we have encountered about discrimination is that when this girl, she was from New Brunswick, right? New Brunswick. And so we had a karaoke night, and mostly when we do the karaoke queen competition, it was held in a Filipino restaurant because Filipinos love karaoke. So this girl, well, she was a teen to begin with, and she told one of our parent volunteers that she was crying. She was really crying and making a fit because she said, I don't eat that kind of food. Back home where I'm from, there's not a lot of culture. We eat chicken, potatoes, steak potatoes, corn, rice, bread, but we don't eat that kind of food. So obviously we have to accommodate her, and the parent volunteer had to drive her to bring her to McDonald's because that's the food that she's used to, McDonald's. Another girl was also throwing a fit because of food, and she had to one parent volunteer had to bring her to Subway, and another one at country style donuts and Tim Hortons. So that itself is racism and stereotypes, and it's so sad that it is happening in Canada still. And up to this point, we still have to educate a lot of young girls about these kind of things, because again, it is unfortunate that there are some parts in Canada that are not very multicultural, and therefore their parents never trained them to be multicultural or try different things. And I have to say this also, and please, I hope that the First Nations will not be upset with me, but it also happened. I'm just telling the truth here, because there's a lot of First Nations that I love. I love First Nations, as I mentioned. I take care of them when they're here in Toronto. Like, most of our titles are First Nations, but there are some that are very rude, has given a lot of racial statements to our staff. And even I remember these few girls, and this happened like 2 years ago when we were in a Filipino restaurant as well. And they said, "Oh, I don't eat that kind of food. So do you have rice?" So they've asked for rice because obviously in the buffet there's steamed rice, right? And then they've asked for butter, and they were all of them lined up for the butter and were mixing it with rice, and that's what they ate, instead of trying to be open and experiencing different kind of cultural food, cultural cuisines, different kind of cultural cuisines. And even when we went to a Chinese restaurant, they would just eat rice and put soy sauce because that's what they're used to at home. So I was very disappointed because, first and foremost, about discrimination and racism, I think that the First Nations, or people who has First Nations descent or Indigenous, should know and talk about racism and break the stereotypes, because they've experienced them. They've experienced racism themselves and discrimination themselves. But some of them, because they're coming from areas again with no other ethnicities, that they are actually like screened or very barred from the society, and that's so sad. And I'm hoping that one day everybody in Canada can experience different kind of cultures, because that's what Canadians are all about. And it's not an excuse because they live in a town or a city or a province that is not very multicultural, because Canada is known to become an area of immigrants and a land of opportunity, and that other peoples from other countries come to Canada to live the American dream. I have to say the American dream, because what Americans pursue as the American dreams, we do it twice or more, because we give so much more opportunities to all new Canadians and to all Canadians. And it's saying that we live in a land of the free, and we live in a land where everybody is allowed to practice their own cultural background and be proud of it and unite it with other people to be a better Canadian. So I hope that if you're watching this video, I hope that I didn't offend any people in any way. I'm just saying my experience and the reality of it, that racism still does exist in Canada, and especially in pageants. But our role, my role as a director, is to always break the stereotypes and teach young women to open themselves up to everything, because when they are outside of Canada and they're representing our country, people of the world are expecting Canadians to be nice, respectful, and open to different things. That's what they know Canada, what Canadian people are about, what Canadians are, to be accepting of differences. So thank you so much for watching this video. Again, please like, share, and subscribe this video, and hit the bell button so that you can get updates of all new videos that we'll be posting, that is close to your heart and to every Canadian's heart, especially in pageantry. Have yourself a wonderful evening, everyone. Oh, before I forget, I'm very proud of my MCGP team and the MCGP family. This is what makes us family. No matter our racial differences and the distance of where we live from one another, we learn to love one another and be supportive of each other, and make ourselves as one big pageant family, full of love, with a lot of cultural differences, but we still love each other and accept one another and respect one another. So thank you so much again, and that's a message. One little word of advice, and I'm always a firm believer of this because my mom would say this when she was alive. If you have nothing better to say, don't say it. If you have nothing good to say at all, then don't open your mouth and say something. Because one day, it will come back to you, and whoever you hurt with, there will be someone that you will meet that will even hurt you even more. So it's the law of nature. It's the law of humanity. Do unto others what others would want. Do unto others what you want others to be done unto you. So thank you again. Have yourself a good night.